Welcome y'all, it's ShoZEN Infinity here. I hope you are having an amazing blessed day. In this video I want to discuss, as you can see from the title, buried Roman amphitheatres and theatres. And this video idea really sparked from when I travelled to Naples, or Napoli, however you like to say it, and experienced and saw with my own eyes a buried underground Roman theatre. I've become much more interested in ancient Roman history, and you can see this because I made a video a while back about the excavations of Rome, which occurred throughout the 19th to the 20th century, and really questioning what happened that caused, all these ancient structures and forums to be buried and only to be excavated in the last 200 or 100 years. And that goes the same with many other archaeological excavation sites, is that they've only been really so-called discovered within the last century or the last 2 centuries, which I find really interesting given that we are told that the Roman Empire fell in the year 476 AD. And then obviously after that you have what historians call the Middle Ages, or what's deemed as the Dark Ages, because many things were lost and not a whole lot was recorded down in that period of time. And it's not until nearly 1,000 years later, with the upcoming Renaissance, that things like art and architecture and human technological advancement was introduced again. In Nepal's underground Roman theatre, which can only be accessed by going into someone's basso, which is a typical Neapolitan house, and going down into their basement to see the remains of this Roman theatre. So I started to question how this came to be. How did this massive Roman theatre become buried under the city? And this building was important, as we know from historians, that Emperor Nero himself performed here. The explanation we got from our tour guide as to why this theatre was buried and hidden underground nowadays is because after the fall of the Roman Empire, during the medieval period, people didn't really use this theatre anymore, which I find strange in itself, because it must have been very popular during Roman times. But later in the medieval period, it wasn't used anymore. So instead, they just used it as a foundation to build new houses on top of the theatre, which again seems weird to me, because to me it's more common sense to take apart all the materials and the stones in which you can use as well to build new houses, instead of building on top of the caviar. This website here just gives us some more information and a little bit more history about this theatre. And after it was used as a theatre, as here it says, during the medieval period, after it saw the oblivion of the structure from the people, it was used as a small necropolis or landfill. And then between the 15th and 17th century, it was overwhelmed by construction of buildings. So it took them nearly over 1,000 years after the fall of the Roman Empire to start construction of buildings on top of this theatre. And it was until 1859 that modern day archaeologists rediscovered this theatre. Now, I just want to speculate a little bit and give an alternative explanation to perhaps why this amphitheatre was buried. And that is perhaps some kind of cataclysm caused this huge Roman structure to be buried. The reason I think this is because this Naples amphitheatre isn't a one case off. It is an anomaly. In fact, you see this in many of the ancient Roman cities that were once very prevalent in the Roman Empire. So I think some kind of event or events caused this to happen. Here I'm going to present other examples of amphitheatres and theatres from the Roman Empire that have been rediscovered and excavated in recent times. Now, with the first one that I want to quickly touch on is the Amphitheatre of Pompeii. Now, Pompeii needs no introduction. It was buried in the year 79 AD and was caused by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And obviously, that was a natural cataclysm that caused this. So I continued and tried to search for one that's perhaps more modern. And I found the Amphitheatre of Catania. Catania obviously being in Sicily, Italy, and it's a fairly new one in terms of its excavation, in which only started from the second half of the 18th century. And the explanation given for its burial was that it was because of a Sicily earthquake in the year 1693. And therefore this amphitheatre was turned into a parade ground. And what's even more interesting about this one is that excavations haven't been fully completed yet, and there's conservation projects in place at this moment to preserve this amphitheatre. With this next one, we look at Cheshire in England, where the amphitheatre was only rediscovered in 1929 when there was construction going on and they found the pits of the wall by coincidence. It is a fairly small amphitheatre compared to the other ones, and it's the only foundation that you can be seen nowadays. And as a result of it being only discovered within 100 years, there's no explanation as perhaps why it was buried in the first place and destroyed. Turning towards Wales in Caerleon, there was an excavation in 1909 at the Caerleon Amphitheatre, and like this article website here says, nearly 30,000 tons of soil was excavated. This is just a nice collage of photos from that excavation. Looking back at England in Richborough, this is a headline from the BBC News that says, Richborough Roman Amphitheatre dig once in a lifetime opportunity, and that's from the 9th of March 2020, so in very recent times. So they presume there's an amphitheatre under this mound that you can see here. And from this article segment that I cropped out from the Guardian News, there's quotations that says, we knew the amphitheatre was there because of a partial excavation in 1849. In the bottom right corner there is a skull of what they think is a domestic cat. In London, after over 100 years of searching by archaeologists, in the year 1988, they finally found the amphitheatre hidden underneath Guildhall Yard. Looking at the Italian amphitheatres, obviously there is loads across the country. So here are just some that I just want to point my attention to and talk about. So there's this amphitheatre in Lucca, and it resembles similarly to the one in Naples, where they built buildings on top of the amphitheatre. And in this one, you can clearly tell that this was once an amphitheatre with its oval shape. And I can't help wonder what else is buried there as well. On to the next city in Italy, in Lecce, there is a 2nd AD amphitheatre that has only been partially excavated. The reason being that its existence was unknown until as recently as 1901, so just over 100 years ago. And the only reason they rediscovered this was because there was construction being done and digging out the earth to build a bank. And they found this amphitheatre there. And this is almost like a theme that's going on with many of these cities that have these amphitheatres that were forgotten and lost. The last one I want to talk about is this one in Florence beneath Piazza della Signoria. And this theatre stretches underneath the Palazzo Vecchio, which is one of the most famous and most noticeable town halls in the world. And I believe it was only discovered within a decade ago, and only a small portion of the theatre, which is in ruins, can be visited and seen due to its existence in such a historical place. Thanks for watching. As always, make sure you have liked the video and subscribed if you're new, and be sure to support me on my Patreon.